Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Pilot Principle. This is the podcast where we take a look at just the first episode of a series, the pilot, and then use it to decide if we should watch the entire series. I know it's a bit of a tall order, but if you like spoilers and deep dives, then make sure to follow, like, and rate this podcast wherever you are listening, because I review a new show every single week-ish. Now, on this episode of The Pilot Principle, we are chatting episode 1 of the new Disney Plus drama/thriller series, Paradise. Tranquility explodes when a shocking murder occurs and a high-stakes investigation unfolds. I love that the series synopsis basically gives away absolutely nothing about this show. If memory serves, I saw a brief trailer for this show months ago, but I honestly cannot recall what was in it. But I do remember it was going to be kind of a whodunit political conspiracy thriller type show. So that's essentially why I decided to press play. Also, I do like Sterling K. Brown, and I feel like I haven't seen him in enough stuff. So this is my chance to expand my filmography of his work. And you know what? Sometimes that's enough. Honestly, I'm not fussy. Right, before we get into looking at the pilot in a bit more detail, let's talk credits. The pilot is titled Wildcat is Down, and the synopsis tells us Agent Xavier Collins discovers one of the world's most powerful individuals has been murdered. We have an episode length of 51 minutes and a series length of 8 episodes. And Paradise is streaming episodically on Disney Plus in the UK and Hulu in the US with a 3-episode premiere, which is nice. It's very generous of them, I think. The pilot was written by Dan Fogelman, who is also the creator of the series, and Fogelman created and wrote the exceedingly popular This Is Us, which I've only seen the pilot episode for. He also did the series Gallivant, which is this really random comedy thing. Switching gears, he also wrote the movie Crazy Stupid Love, and was one of the writers on Tangled, as in Disney's Tangled. I know it's a bit of an eclectic filmography he's got, but it does show that he's got range and that his stories have depth, humour and heart. So, you know, that's something we can hopefully expect to see in the pilot episode for Paradise. We've got double directors for the pilot episode. So we've got Glenn Ficarra and John Reca. And as a duo, they directed Crazy Stupid Love and episodes of This Is Us. I presume individually, but I don't know, maybe they also did that together. They also have a lot of writing and producing credits, but we are not going to get into that. Cross-referencing their filmographies, Fogelman, Ficarra and Reca are kind of giving power of 3 energy, you know, and I love that for them. It shows that they can produce good works together, and hopefully Paradise will be another one of those good works. Moving over to cast, we have Sterling K. Brown, who plays Xavier Collins. And most recently, Brown has starred in American Fiction and Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul. But what Brown is most known for is starring in Black Panther and This Is Us, another one who's part of the This Is Us family. James Marsden plays President Cal Bradford, and most recently, Marsden has starred in Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Unfrosted. I personally have not seen Marsden in anything for a very long time, and for a lot of people he's known for a lot of the early noughties movies like X-Men and Hairspray, 27 Dresses and Enchanted. He was that guy, kind of like how Matthew McConaughey around the time in the romantic comedy space was that guy. Now, the pilot also stars Julianne Nicholson, John Beavers, Nicole Bryden Bloom and Chris Marshall. Right, we've dotted the I's and crossed the T's. Let's get into talking about the first 10 minutes of the pilot episode. And typically, we always look at the first 10 minutes of a pilot episode because this is what should intrigue us and excite us and confuse us in a good way to keep watching the entire pilot episode, which will then hopefully convince us to watch the entire series. And the first 10 minutes goes like this. We meet Xavier Collins as he lies in bed alone, clearly missing somebody who should be sleeping next to him. He gets up, leaves notes for his kids and goes for a run. He bumps into his neighbour and exchanges a few polite words on the weather, which was very British. Then he's off on a jog around a town that looks eerily like Stars Hollow. His jog leads him to the exterior of a house. Now, Xavier is obviously the head of security, but he's not on duty yet. So, after a quick check-in with the security on duty, Billy, Xavier returns home. Now, we get some domestic scenes with him and his 2 kids before he suits up and heads back to the house we saw him jog to earlier to start his workday. Xavier relieves some of the other guards on duty, but everything in the house is a little too quiet. So Xavier knocks on the door of the man who lives in the house, who he is protecting, the president. And let's just say Mr. President can't come to the phone right now. Why? Because he's dead. And that is the 9-minute mark. And as an intro, I love it when a good intro comes under time, 9 minutes? Like, you're just showing off. You have a minute to spare and you were like, nah, mic dropped, I'm done. I think the intro was very, very, very clean. And the fact that it came in under 10 minutes showed that it didn't put in anything unnecessary in that intro. Everything was very, very intentional. I also like from the intro that we get the sense that someone is missing, has died when it comes to Xavier's relationship, his wife or partner or what have you. Also, I think there was a good build up to who lives in the secure mansion. And of course, that great end of intro hook with finding the president dead. I mean, can you imagine? Like, that's actually so awkward. Like, you have one job and you failed in 9 minutes. Over the course of the pilot episode, we get to know 2 characters in particular really well. The first is, of course, Xavier Collins. Now, Collins is a guy who's just trying to do his job, and he seems like a guy who does it well. I mean, the fact that he hasn't even started his shift yet and he's already gone to check on on what's happening at work. I mean, firstly, that could never be me. But secondly, it shows a level of commitment and dedication to the job that he's doing. Also, he's clearly likable. We watch him have a bit of a back and forth, banterous kind of male ha-ha moment with Billy. And we get to see him as a possible grieving husband / parent to his kids. So all in all, in the pilot episode, we get a pretty well-rounded look at Xavier Collins. I don't know if he's an agent. Are Secret Service people agents? Do they come from the FBI or CIA or police? If you know, let me know. Now, in terms of what Collins wants in the pilot episode, he wants to find out what happened. I mean, in the first 9 minutes, he finds his boss dead. However, what happens following this is really interesting because Collins does not report the fact that the president is dead. Instead, he asks his team to hold off on alerting anybody for 30 minutes and uses that time to investigate and look around and see what isn't where it should or shouldn't be. Now, he does this because he believes somebody called Sinatra will close him out once they sound that alarm. I think Collins needs to work out who he can trust. He clearly does not trust this person, Sinatra, or maybe he does trust them and he's just a bit of a rogue agent and he wants to know as much as possible before he is eventually expelled from the case because, I mean, the president was killed on his watch. There's no way they're going to allow him to investigate what happened in case he was involved, right? So I'm thinking that he needs to work out who he can trust. He needs to watch his back in case perhaps he's being set up. In terms of how he changes over the course of the episode, it's quite interesting because the show is actually done across 2 timelines. So the past and then the present. And in the past, we see how Xavier, I keep flip-flopping between his names, Xavier Collins, Xavier and or Collins. We see how Xavier starts to work for the president. We watch as Xavier saves the president's life. And in the present, we see a coldness to how Xavier talks to the president, considering they had started to form some sort of bond in the past. The president says to Xavier, "When did you stop calling me sir?" So, Xavier is professional, but for some reason he is angry at the president. And there is an absolute savage line that Xavier says to the president, but I will get to that when I talk about the end of episode hook. Now, in terms of where I think Xavier's character might go over the course of the series, I don't know. I think I'm just leaning towards him being framed for the murder of the president. I don't know why, but that just kind of seems like a likely plot that the series could go down. And of course, he'll want to try and find the truth. So I'm sure he's going to investigate and get on people's nerves and uncover things that he shouldn't know as he investigates. The second character to talk about is Cal Bradford, and Cal is the current or former president of the United States. It's not quite clear. In the past timeline, he is currently president, but in the present timeline, I think he was the past president. It's unclear. But when we meet Cal in the past, because technically in the present, he's dead. So we mostly get to see Cal in the past and in present day flashbacks. It's kind of confusing actually, because you've got the past timeline, you've got the present day timeline, and then you've kind of got flashbacks to like 24 hours ago from the present. So it's, yeah, but I'm going to say it's 2 timelines because otherwise it just gets a bit confusing. So 2 timelines and a cheeky flashback. Now, in the past, when it comes to Cal, he tells us that he's a nice guy. And we do think he's a nice guy. He's jokey, funny, he's direct, he smiles, he's nice to Xavier. So, you know, we don't not like him. But we can tell, despite the niceties and the smiles, that there is a burden that he holds on his shoulder from being president, which, you know, makes sense. In the past, he mentions that his wife is likely to leave him, and in the present, we see that he lives alone without his wife or his son. And I think that's what Cal wants from the Cal that we see and get to know in the pilot episode. He wants to spend time with his son, but that ain't happening. However, it kind of feels like Cal needs to accept the tough choices that he has had to make as president. It's all a bit vague because we only get snippets of conversation and there are loads of hints about what may have happened in the past to lead to the present day, but nothing is completely confirmed and we don't know any hardcore decisions that Cal has had to make. In the past, he's this happy, cheery, everybody loves me kind of guy who's trying to make friends with his bodyguard and slowly succeeds. But then in the present, somebody says this is the first time he's gotten out of his robe all week. So who knows what went down, but we feel sad for this present day Cal who has been murdered. And over the pilot, through 2 timelines, we sort of watch the build up and the fallout of Xavier and Cal's relationship. And this makes for a really engaging watch because we're wondering what in the world happened between these 2. And now it is time for a quick interlude to see what my film and TV life has been looking like beyond the pilot principle. And of course, we always start with books. Now, I have in fact finished reading 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. It wasn't my favourite, let's just put it like that. I think the main character was just so passive that it got old really quickly. I have started reading Ace of Spades by Farida Abike Ayimide, but I haven't read that much. I think I might be 100 pages into the book. But they're still very much like in high school mode, like, oh no, I like this boy, and oh no, everybody knows my secret. And if there's one thing about me, I don't mind YA if it's a YA thriller. So I'm just waiting for the, you know, oh no, somebody's dead. We're going to have to Scooby-Doo the case and find out who done did it. That I'm interested in. That was a lot more information than I intended on the book reading, but let's move right along to talk about film. And I have done very well since we last talked about what I'd watched. So of late, I have watched A Complete Unknown, which I didn't like. I think the story was just a bit everywhere personally, and there was just no real focus on what they were trying to say about Dylan's life. Then I watched Back in Action on Netflix. Fun, easy, exactly what it said on the tin. I watched Baby Girl, which is with Nicole Kidman and Harris Dickinson. I think when I walked out of the cinema, I was like, But then the more I think about it and the sort of deeper themes of power dynamics and things like that, it's actually a pretty interesting movie. And the last new movie I watched was The Brutalist. And this is the movie that is making a massive splash all over awards season. And you know what? I get it. This made sense. This is how you do a biography, A Complete Unknown. Watch The Brutalist and go back and rethink what you've done. I think The Brutalist, yeah, was a really, really good movie. I think it's 2 parts and an epilogue. Part 1 was definitely the strongest. Part 2, not so much. The epilogue, was it necessarily needed in that way? Possibly not. But overall, as an entire package, I think it's a really extraordinary movie. A few more films to mention. I know, right? Who is she? So these are the movies that have been on my list for ages and I finally managed to tick off. The first was The Lost Boys, and that is an 80s movie about vampires. I then watched Southpaw, which stars Jake Gyllenhaal. Again, I liked that. And finally, I watched Midsommar, and I watched this because it's been on my list for a little while, but then I saw it was leaving Prime in like 3.5 hours, and it's like a 2.5 hour movie. So I suddenly was like, shit, play. And I liked it a lot more than I was expecting. I think I understand Florence Pugh now. And I don't know if daylight horror is a thing, but if it's not, let's start incorporating more of this into film. Okay, right, one more list to ramble through, and that is what's been happening over in TV land. So I'm still watching Parenthood as my sort of easy little lunchtime show. Although I have to say, it does get a bit jarring because every episode somebody's congratulating somebody else for being a good parent. It's like, okay, I guess they need constant reassurance, but I'm not a parent. Maybe that is exactly what you need. I also binged watched Citadel, and that is the one that stars the gorgeous Priyanka Chopra and Richard Madden, who should be so lucky. And I think it didn't get decent reviews when it came out, but you know what, it was okay. It was an easy, 6 or 8 episode watch. I literally flew through it. Another show that I flew through was The Innocent, and this one has been on my list for a very, very, very long time, and this is a Harlan Coben Netflix adaptation, but it's a Spanish adaptation. Listen, one thing to say about Spanish dramas is they are on the overdramatic side, but the twists and the turns, you will see nothing like it. So yeah, if you can put up with the slightly extraneous dramatics and you like a Harlan Coben mystery, or just a mystery in general, then yes, I would say watch it. I applauded to myself at the end of the series, so make of that what you will. Oh, this is a very exciting one, people. Guess who has 2 thumbs, a microphone, and has finally finished watching The Day of the Jackal? It's this girl. It's me. Honestly, I can't tell you why I ended up stopping it. I think I stopped at episode 7. Yeah, so then I had 8, 9, and 10 to watch. I think it was just so stressful. I just couldn't do it, but I did it. And the ending really took me by surprise. I did not see that shit coming. And you know what, though? It makes perfect sense in terms of who the main characters are and, you know, the wants and desires that they deserve to have been met. It makes sense. But yeah, didn't see that shit coming. So yeah, I get it. Great. Okay, that was a bit of a long list, but it's been a little while. Make sure you let me know if you are taking any of these recommendations over on Instagram and Twitter at Pilot Principle. Okay, let's get back to Paradise. I hope I didn't confuse you too much with talk about the past timeline, the present timeline, and the present flashback timeline, which isn't a timeline. That sounds more confusing. But what should help clear things up a bit is if we talk through the 3 main plot points. Firstly, with the main storyline, we've got who killed the president, Cal Bradford, and of course why. Now, what we also see in the pilot episode is that there is this tablet, like an iPad, that contains sensitive government information, and Xavier Collins discovers while he is doing his investigation before he calls in the president's murder, this tablet has gone missing. So I believe these 2 things are entwined and are likely the main plot point for the pilot episode that will then spur into the series. In terms of the secondary story arc plot point, I would say that would be what's going on in the world. So in the past timeline, the president hints that something big is coming. So I believe if we keep going back to the past throughout the rest of the series, we will learn what this possible global catastrophe could be and whether or not they are able to avert it. In terms of a third story arc, I think this could possibly have something to do with who has it out for Xavier, because we briefly meet his superiors, a woman named Robinson and a woman named Sinatra. And I don't know, like there's just this vibe that they both hate him and that he doesn't necessarily like them. You know, if your superiors don't like you, then that stops you from getting access to certain things. And perhaps his superiors are the ones to blame for what happens to the president. I don't know. Okay? I've only watched the pilot episode. I can only make wild suggestions for you. But, but yeah, those are the three main storylines that the pilot episode sets up. And now that we've had a look at that, we can do a little fast forward to talk about the end of episode Hook. Right, so in the past, Xavier is given high security clearance and gains knowledge about said catastrophic event that could be coming soon. Now, in the present, but let's call it the present flashback, just before the president dies, he says to Xavier, who has of course stopped calling him sir and is just a bit more cold with him than he used to be in the past. He says, "When will you forgive me?" Then Xavier says, "I'll forgive you when I can sleep again, and I'll sleep again when you're dead." Girl, I said, oh, Xavier, buddy, be careful what you wish for. My jaw literally dropped. I know it doesn't take much for my jaw to drop, but it did. At that line, I said that is some pure savagery and I'm here for the bars. But at the same time, I feel like Xavier's really regretting those as a final last words to his boss. But it's not over. There's one more thing that happens at the end of the episode. Because as it bloody turns out, said possible catastrophic event has likely happened. And so this whole thing, this whole Stars Hollow-esque creepy town, how's the weather malarkey, is actually taking place inside a hidden underground city in Colorado. Feel free to rewind, but I said what I said. I know, right? What the actual fudge cake. I did not see that coming. However, it's a great ending because it links perfectly to how things begun in those opening 10 minutes. You know, him jogging around this idealistic town, la 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 la. Yeah, turns out none of it's even real, bro. What the end of episode Hook also does is tell us that over the course of the series, we can possibly expect to learn what exactly happened to the world, as well as Cal's wife. You know, is she actually dead or is she just on the outside? And what does that mean? Is there a cure if there has been some sort of plague type situation? Also, there must be a conspiracy because whoever stole what's been stolen must be within the dome, which turns everything into a massive locked room mystery. And who even knows if any of this is real? You know, this could all be a simulation. I don't know, but I think it's going to get wild. Now, in terms of the pilot's positives, for me, I think it was just really, really, really well constructed. The flip between the past and the present wasn't overly complicated, despite how I kept describing it. So it sounds complicated. I promise you, it's actually very simplistically done. There's also a cool effect they do when Xavier is taking in the scene of the murder, like it does a weird shuttery, like mirrory effect. I don't know, just watch it. But I think that was a really good signifier for him taking in and making mental snapshots of things that could be important into discovering who murdered the president. You know, whether he's the current president or the past president is beyond me at this point. I think the pilot plays with tension really well. The audience are constantly wondering what the hell is going on. We can feel that there's something not quite right between Xavier and Cal. We feel that there's something not quite right about this world, even though we can't quite put our fingers on what it is. And I think that knowledge that we haven't been told everything is really effective in the pilot episode. Also, I'd say that there are a number of secrets that are really well sprinkled into the pilot that will obviously grow over the course of the series. So I would say that if you like a closed room political conspiracy drama that isn't too heavy-handed on the action, then you will enjoy the understated but effective Paradise. Now, on the flippity flip side, in terms of what didn't quite work with the pilot, I would say that considered it cited as a thriller. From the pilot, at least, I'd call it a mystery, which to some might sound similar, but these are actually two very different genres. Now, I've had my moments of pressing play and expecting an action and violence and getting a slow-moving drama that makes you think. And honestly, there's nothing more disappointing. Also, I would say that the flip back and forth in time was good. It worked really well, but it did begin to feel a little easy. It just felt a bit easy. It felt very on beat. I began to expect them to flip back in time to explain something that had happened in the present, which gave it a bit of a formulaic feel. So yes, if you want something more thriller than mystery and you hate when shows flip-flop between the past and the present, then Paradise might not be for you. Oh yes, before I give the pilot episode of Paradise a pilot score, I want to quickly note that I also just kind of loved the hints that this pilot dropped. For example, there is a scene where Cal says, "So concludes another day with you and me in paradise," which, firstly, 10 out of 10 for dropping in a show title in the pilot episode. We love to see it. But also, they're literally trapped in paradise because they're trapped in a controlled environment inside a dome. Fantastic. There are so many great signposted moments throughout the pilot episode, which is a fantastic segue into letting you know that I give this pilot a 4 out of 5. I think it excels in sort of slowly teasing out the big picture. Like, yes, the president is dead, but how did we get to that point? Not to mention the fact that there are a lot of clues for us to follow as an audience. Also, the fact that there is that plot twist that was teased from the first piece of dialogue, where they're just chatting about the weather. Chef's kiss. I do think that the pilot does fall short in feeling a little predictable in the back and forth with the past and present timelines. But overall, it's a good pilot. It's a bloody good pilot. And I got to the end and immediately wanted to watch the next episode, which I will in fact be doing now that I've recorded this. Thanks for joining me this week. Yay or nay, have I convinced you to watch beyond episode 1 of Paradise? Because episode 2 and 3 are right there. My friend said something interesting. When a new show drops and they release the first 2 or 3 episodes, are we obligated to watch those to get a feel for the story and almost look at it as one big pilot? Or not? There's a philosophical question for you to consider. Now, I want to hear your thoughts on philosophy as well as the pilot episode of Paradise. You can chat to me over on Instagram and Twitter at Pilot Principle, and I will catch you on the next episode. Aww.